pressing that.
This meeting is being recorded.
Perfect. Happy days, thank you.
Hi everyone, good morning. Many thanks for attending today. My name is Sinead Lunny from Public Speaking NI, and I'm really delighted to be here this morning to have been invited by SIDO to deliver this training today. So I have called this workshop Own the Room, Present with Gravitas and Authority. What I hope it will be is 1.5 hours of informative and interactive information. There will be some practical exercises because really, in my view, there is no use at all in me talking at you all for the whole time period. The reason everyone is here this morning, I assume, is potentially to pick up some tips and techniques in relation to how to enhance your existing skills and pick up some new skills along the way. So this word gravitas, I use it all the time, and I just think it really is extremely powerful. There are very few people, if any, who don't want to speak with gravitas or more gravitas. There is a certain weightiness, excuse the pun, attached to that word. Clearly, it's a Latin word meaning heaviness, weightiness, having a presence. So what I hope to bring you all today is something a little bit unique. Anyone can Google, how do I improve my communication skills? But hopefully what my workshop will show you is that there are some tried and tested ways that you can use to improve your communication skills. I wonder, is it possible for everyone to mute themselves? There's a little bit of noise coming in from the background there. That would be great. Okay. So a little bit of background about me. Some of you know me already. Used to be a solicitor, left the law about 6 years ago now. Didn't really ever enjoy it. The only thing I enjoyed was listening to people in the courtroom and trying to work out why he was more capable of persuading a jury than she was, or why she was such a fantastic orator compared to other people. I was more interested in working out what part of the world they were from in relation to their accent and their dialect, as opposed to having any passion about the law, my poor clients in hindsight. So after a particularly traumatic event, our son unfortunately was born with a heart condition. He's fine now, he's 7 years old, but it really made me reassess things. And I thought it was a cliche until it happened to me. But in my experience, once something like that happens to you, it really does make you think about things in a whole other way. I thought to myself, do you know what? I'm not really that happy in my current job. What other skills do I have? So I always enjoyed speech and drama. I always wanted to go on to become an actress. I always pined for the days when I did a lot of performances on stage, a lot of debating. And I thought, well, I suppose I could teach speech and drama. So I went to a wonderful teacher called Anne Garvey, who's here today. Hello, Anne. And I spoke to her about what I would need to do to become a speech and drama teacher. So Anne very capably and kindly guided me through. And I taught my first class, in which there were about 2 or 3 people, in 2017. I ended up coming out of the class absolutely elated and thinking, this is what I should have been doing all along. So from the speech and drama then grew Public Speaking NI. So what exactly is that? Really, adults then came to me and said, look, I know you only teach children, but I've got a wedding speech to do. I've got a work presentation to do. I've got some big event that I'm quite nervous about. Can you help me out? So I put my skills to use in that regard and got some qualifications from New Era Academy London with regard to public speaking. Voiceover work then came out of that. I've always enjoyed accents and dialects and languages, and I now do a lot of voiceover work for TV and radio and some animations as well. So the bulk of my work in relation to public speaking now is vocal training, presentation skills training, and communication skills training. Most of it would be face-to-face, some of it would be online, and there's definitely a lot of hybrid working now. I think we've all realised that the future is going to be a balance of working face-to-face and online. So long story short, I'm now doing what I actually enjoy doing, and I'm such a vocal nerd that I have learned lots of different skills from lots of different organisations and courses that I've been on over the past couple of years. So hopefully I can impart some of that information to you all today. Why are we here? I tried to summarise this into 10 points. I don't propose to read them all out, as they're very clear there, hopefully on screen. Really, for me, the crux of good communication skills is having a strong and powerful voice. That does not necessarily mean you have to have a very, very loud voice, but it does mean your voice needs to be pleasant sounding and persuasive. Projection, breathing control, diction, clarity, all of these things overlap. So there's quite a lot of repetition.
Sorry, Sinead, your next slide hasn't come up.
Okay.
It's just the Zoom page that's up. Even if you try and unshare your screen and share it again, it might fix it.
Okay. The joys of technology, it's wonderful, isn't it?
Whole host of new problems.
Whole host of new problems. You still can't see that, no?
No, not yet.
Yeah, it says your screen sharing is paused.
So it is sharing, but see if you just try and even hit that green button down, or like just the stop screen sharing. It's all, and then go back into it. Make sure you click on the PowerPoint window.
Resume share. Well, this hopefully looks promising enough. Let's see.
Yeah, got your screen there.
Okay. Any better?
Yep, there we go.
Fantastic. Lovely.
Perfect.
Okay, so not to repeat myself, the main thrust of what I'm going to be talking about today is vocal power, I suppose, the complexity and the persuasiveness of the voice. Communicating more concisely, that's something, you know, including myself, that I think most people could improve upon. There's quite a lot of waffling sometimes, again, myself included. Sometimes it's difficult, especially when you're under pressure, to try to be succinct. So that's another skill that I think is quite relevant. Cultivating poise and self-confidence, that's another word that I just love, poise. So there's a certain, you know, not elegance really, but a certain grace and I suppose ease within yourself. That's important when you're trying to communicate freely, persuade an audience. So we're going to be looking at that as well. Engaging your audience effectively, whether that be online or face-to-face. Body language, we're not going to deal a huge amount on that. We'll certainly touch on it going through. Effective strategies to channel nerves. Now that permeates a lot. You know, whenever people are asked to deliver a presentation, to conduct something very important in the workplace, or sometimes when we have to deal with something off the cuff, sometimes the nerves can really, really catch hold. And there are certain little techniques that personally I find very helpful, and my clients do as well, to try to counteract that. Okay, so the little introductory slide here, simply that we all have communication skills. Not to sound patronizing, but we all have a certain degree of skill. Most people want to improve upon those. So let's finally get started here. Some of the feedback that I had on this particular course is that it's practical and interactive. So that's very, very important. As I said earlier, there's absolutely no point in me talking at you. No matter how good I think any presentation is, people's attention spans begin to wane after a certain period. So I've tried to make it as interactive as possible. Having said that, I don't want people to feel under terrible pressure to interact, to respond, although it does make it much more enjoyable. Relevant as well. So once again, a lot of these skills are transferable, and they're relevant to both your professional environment and also your personal environment. The last thing that I will say is that some of the feedback has clearly said that people have enjoyed it. So because I also teach children, I've had to find ways to ensure that it is fun. A lot of the content is pretty dull. I've said it, hands up, it's pretty boring, quite dry. So I've tried to find ways that make it a little bit more bearable. This is a question that I ask of all of my clients, no matter who it is. If it's a global corporate client, if it is a personal, private one-to-one client, I always ask them this at the outset. If you have a pen and paper, please write your answer down. What is it that you want your audience to think about you when you are speaking? And that's really, really important because it is different for each person. Some people may say confident, intelligent, passionate, driven, educated. It could be any words at all. If you can take a minute and have a think about which 3 words you would choose, take a note of them. And it's very important that your 3 words beside you at all times. So my 3 words are typed into the notes part of my phone. Some clients of mine have them written on a post-it note in their office. Still others write them in the back of their hands prior to some big work presentation or whatever it may be. Twee and contrived, as this is going to sound. In my experience, if you tell yourself that you are something, you start to believe it, and more importantly, you are more likely to be perceived as that. So if you start to think to yourself mid-flow, oh goodness, this is going terribly, I'm not doing a good job, people are bored, I am nervous, that's going to come across. So you need to remind yourself, well, hold on a little second here, I am whatever your 3 words may be. So for example, I am intelligent, motivated, driven, passionate, energized, whatever it may be. So now that you have written your 3 words down, please keep them with you at all times. And whenever we get to do the practical exercises here today, if you could remind yourselves, take a little glance down at those 3 words to, give yourself a little boost. Icebreaker, everyone always groans at this. People at times dread it and think, oh goodness, here we go, what's this going to be about? But because we're such a small group today, I think it would be good to get to know each other a little bit. And it would be helpful for me if everyone interacted. So including Niall McKevitt, hopefully he hasn't escaped at this point. I'll start with, I'm not sure if it's interesting or fun, but it's certainly a fact about me. It's a bit of a strange one, that I eat lemons. I eat lemons as though they're oranges. And I've been doing that for years, since I was a child. No idea why, but it seems to be a very strange vice that I have. Of course, there are plenty more vices, worse ones than that, but that is my weird fact. Would anyone like to be brave enough to share a fun or interesting fact about them? Oh, brilliant, Lynn, fantastic, immediately. If you want to unmute yourself there, Lynn. Go ahead.
I was born the 29th of February, so really I'm only 15 and a half.
And you certainly look it, Lynn.
I wish.
Fantastic. And have you found that to be strange going through life? Do you celebrate a birthday on the day before then every 4 years?
Yes, I celebrate it on the 28th of February. When computers first started to come in and that, I often got stuck because very many of them didn't have their calendar the 29th of February. And so it wouldn't allow me to enter my date of birth. But that has since been rectified. But yeah, it was
Fantastic. In fact, my aunt also, her birthday also falls on that same date as
on the
well.
29th.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very interesting one, very original. I'm not sure if I've ever come across that in any of these workshops yet. Would anyone else like to share something? There's Janice Spence as well. Goodness me, Janice, how are you? I'm going to have to pick on you now. Would you like to unmute yourself?
I was trying to hide. I was trying to hide in the corner so you wouldn't do that. So, yes, an unusual fact about me, I was born in a town called Monze in Zambia.
Goodness. I did not know that, Janice, and I know you quite well. There
Yeah.
we have it. Did you live there for long, Janice?
No, I was only 18 months whenever we came home. My parents went out after they got married. In fact, it was part of their honeymoon. My father was a teacher. My mother was a hairdresser. So she was, I suppose she worked within the local community and my father worked within the school. So it was a very happy time for both of them. Obviously then, whenever I came along, it was much happier. But we returned to Northern Ireland and I've never been back since.
My goodness, Janice.
Yep.
That's very, very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Right.
Anyone else like to share something?
Yeah, I could share a strange fact about myself.
Great.
I have a odd fear of yogurt. If any of my mates open a yogurt in front of me, it just turns to stomach immediately, and I nearly have to leave the room. I've no issue with any other dairy products, but I'm not sure what happened in childhood that's given me this yogurt fear. But that's my strange fact.
Oh my goodness me. Wow, these are pretty incredible, I have to say. Excellent one there.
It's all coming out now.
It's all coming out indeed. Anyone else like to share something?
I'll share something.
Thanks,
Good
Anne.
morning, everyone. It's lovely to be part of this presentation today from this wonderful lady, Sinead. The fun fact I have, I'm a proud mother of 4 daughters, and I have 2 golden retrievers and a pug. So being an avid Game of Thrones fan, I'm sometimes known as Mother of Hounds and Bitches.
Oh, fantastic, Anne. Amazing. Thank you. So I'm actually quite speechless now. Oh, I love it. Thank you so much, Anne. Anyone else? We'll maybe do 2 more. Anyone else like to share something? It's great to get to know everyone, actually, people here don't know as well. Nobody else can be tempted just yet? That's fine, no problem. Could I possibly ask people just to mute themselves? There's a little bit of interference at times coming in, if that's all right. Thank you so much for that. And, it's not easy to, engage in this icebreaker exercise at the outset. Sometimes it can be quite awkward, quite uncomfortable. So I really appreciate everyone taking the time and making the effort. So clearly, it goes without saying, but our voice is one of our most valuable assets. And I see some lawyers here and teachers, and I think, especially for professions like that, when people are relying on us, it's really, integral, I suppose, to doing a good job for our client or for our students, that our voice is comforting, persuasive, and clear. So certainly in my experience as a solicitor, I have seen that the voice can persuade, influence, and command. Now, this part of it won't be interactive. It's more a quiet moment in relation to your views of your own voice. So if you were just to take a moment quietly to describe your own voice, what would those words be? Now, they may not be negative things. You may like the sound of your own voice. In my experience, that is quite uncommon, I have to say, but it's not completely unheard of. If you could think of 3 words to describe your own voice without sharing them, just quietly taking a quick note of them there. And then if you consider how we can use our voice to speak with more gravitas and authority. Once a lawyer, always a lawyer. Here's the boring definition of communication. I don't propose to read this out. Suffice to say that clearly it's a two-way street, that it's not going to be just, or it shouldn't be anyway, a monologue from one person. There should be sharing of information. So every communication involves at least one sender, a message, and a recipient or recipients. And the transmission of that message from sender to the recipient can be affected by a huge range of things. Our emotions, our energy levels, lots of different factors at play there. So the complexity of that is why good communication skills, in my view, are considered so desirable by employers, people in general around the world. So accurate, effective, and unambiguous communication is vital. These figures have been bandied about for years. Sometimes they do fluctuate. I always find it really, really interesting that 55% of how we convey our communication comes through our facial expressions and body language. So actually, no matter what we say, no matter how good the content is, if your body language doesn't reflect your words, people tend to believe the body language over what you're saying. Every time I say that, I'm stunned by it because it just seems so incredible. Verbal, vocal, visual. So the 3 V's of communication. Let's talk about verbal first. The language that you use, vocabulary, grammar. Words are the most powerful drug used by mankind. Rudyard Kipling said that. So when you think about a speaker addressing an audience, how does a good speaker grab the attention of the audience? One of the first ways that a speaker grabs an audience's attention is by their engaging choice of words. A speaker clearly requires to be most careful about word choice, as improper word choice can lead to misunderstanding, confusion, and even offense. To build rapport with your listeners, it's important to ensure that words are well chosen and strategic. Keep them few enough to be concise and convincing enough to be complete. The most persuasive words, apparently, are our first name and the phrase, thank you. Others include, what do you think, results, and proven. Would anyone like to speak to us for 2 minutes maximum on your professional journey, culminating in your current role? If you could choose your words carefully and make it as clear and concise as possible. And just before we get a whole raft of volunteers there, I'm sure there'll be lots of hands going up all over the place. It's really important that whenever you do these exercises, you listen to others and you try to put yourself in their position. Some people are uncomfortable about being here. There's quite a host of reasons why people have attended today. So it's really important to ensure that you give people a platform to speak. So what I propose to do is not to deal with each person as they speak, but rather to make a couple of notes in relation to some technical points, some kind of nuances that I've picked up in their speech, and I will address that generally as we go ahead in this workshop. So I think it's unfair and embarrassing for me to, pinpoint one person and say, well, what I think is you should have done it this way or that way. I think it's very important to respect everyone, and the only comments that I will make will be in a general sense, okay? So already I picked up little nuances in people's speech that I find really, really interesting that maybe some others wouldn't be so nerdy about. So would anyone like to have a go at this? So maximum 2 minutes on your professional journey, culminating in your current role. Any takers for this one?
I don't mind getting us started here, getting the ball
Brilliant,
rolling a little bit.
Thanks so much. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm a bit of a mumbler and everything, so I'll give this my best shot here.
Not at all.
But so currently I am a marketing assistant here at Sido. I first realized my love for marketing in my first position when I was a sales assistant at Sports Direct. I was the top earner for incentive earnings in my branch. And that was when I really found an interest in sales and marketing. And I was currently studying an undergraduate degree in sociology at that time. And I knew that that wasn't really for me, but I was just going to see the course out. Then I found the Masters of Marketing at Queen's, and I felt that it was a course that was very well suited for me. And once I began that, I just really enjoyed every module. And because of my marks, I was then able to complete an internship over the summer with Praxis Care as a marketing assistant. And after that, I was then able to gain the job that I am currently in now, which I have loved to date. And yeah, that's really it, to be honest.
Thank you very much, Niall. Excellent.
Bit of a short one, but good to
What's
get the
that?
ball rolling. It's a bit of a short one, but good to get the ball rolling.
No, absolutely. And I do appreciate, it's a bit of an awkward situation sometimes, especially online. A lot of people don't know each other here. So it's just really putting yourself out there. So I really appreciate that, Niall. Thank you so much. The second V of communication then is vocal. And again, as I said earlier, there's a lot of overlap between lots of these different elements. So inflection, clarity, your pace is very important, your volume of voice as well. So how effective do you all think your own voice is? If somebody would be happy to tell us all about a memorable event in either their career or life, again, keep it very short, even 1 minute, if that would be acceptable to people. Just prior to that, I think the tone of voice is very important to talk about. In my view, it adds to or takes away from what you're saying. So it's very, very important to ensure that your tone of voice is pleasant. Now, ironically, I have a bit of a cold at the moment, so my own tone of voice is rather weak. It's very important to vary your tone. There's at least one speech and drama teacher who will know exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about variation. So it's important to ensure your tone is not the same all the time. It can become quite repetitive, monotonous, dare I say, boring. So how do we make our voices sound more interesting? One of the ways we can do that is by inflection. Simply the upwards or downwards glide of your voice on the musical scale. So I've just done it, albeit very subtly there. We do it naturally sometimes when we ask a question. So whenever I speak to clients and I mention inflection, a lot of the reaction is, well, I would feel very uncomfortable doing that. Surely it sounds very unnatural. I'm not used to doing it. How on earth would I, add this into my normal speaking style? And the truth is, whenever you first try to add in inflection, it does feel a little bit weird. It feels strange. It feels quite awkward. But the more you do it, the more automated it becomes, the more natural sounding it is for you and for others. Your voice represents your personality as well. So it's important, if you want to come across in a certain way, to ensure your voice reflects that. The volume of your voice, a very straightforward one here, the amount of fullness in your voice. Some clients would say to me, they find it difficult to increase the volume of their voice when they're feeling under pressure, nervous, or tired. I would always say to people, a good rule of thumb is to listen out for the echo in the room, and that goes for online as well. So if you can't hear a subtle, faint echo in the room, you're not speaking loudly enough. Do we have a volunteer for this exercise then? A memorable event in your career or life. And again, it doesn't really matter what you say, so you can make it up if it's too personal, if it's too private. It's just really a reason for you to interact with us here, a reason for me to listen to your voice. So if somebody would like to have a go at this one, please. I think Scott is tempted there. You tempted, Scott?
All right, I'll give it a go. I've actually been working overseas for the last 10 years. I'm a mining engineer by trade, and I've spent the last 6 years in Oman.
Wow.
I was general manager of the gypsum business. Oman is the largest exporter of gypsum in the world, believe it or not.
Goodness.
And I was in South Africa on business, and I got a sudden call. Scott, will you get back? Our CEO, group CEO, he's leaving, and we need you back to be interviewed. So I came back, was interviewed. They gave me the COO position. The CFO was acting CEO, and then within 6 months they gave me the CEO position. And I stayed there for 3 years in that position until I came home in December of this year. Basically, COVID did it for me. I've not been able to get home for 2 years, and that was it basically. And now I'm actually going back to Oman in 2 weeks' time. I'm running a course for the government in mining, quarrying, etc., running a course for them. I've done all the presentations. Presentations are all complete. They've all been signed off, and now I have to get up there on the stage and do my bit. I'm used to speaking to likes of board level. I'm not overly experienced in actually lecturing to large numbers of people. But then, so as I say, when I saw this course come up, because I had been in contact with CETO some 10, 12 years ago, I thought let's sign up. I've been through a lot of this before, but I need a refresher. And as I say, so far I've found it very, very interesting. And to be honest, from my experience, it's all about confidence. If you're confident, and you're also confident in what you're talking about, then you should be okay.
Fantastic, Scott. Thank you so much for that. It's so interesting. There's such a wide variety of people here today, people from all walks of life. And as I said earlier, people are here for their own reasons. So that was very interesting. Thank you very, very much for that, Scott.
No problem.
So what I'd like to do is go off on a slight tangent. I do this, I have to be honest, but it's still relevant, don't worry. So what I am hearing in general, what I've heard from some speakers today, is there is something called elision. So it's E-L-I-S-I-O-N, elision or eliding. So what exactly is that? Well, simply put, it is when we skip over certain syllables of words, or sometimes complete words, to get to the next syllable or word. So sometimes when we skip over words, it's usually the smaller words, prepositions in, of, at, okay? When we skip over syllables of words, clearly that's a long word. So what I find is that a lot of people are eliding today. So how do we counteract that? It's not rocket science, and it sounds as though I'm talking myself out of a job here, but being very honest about it, simply it's to listen to yourself completing every syllable of every word, and that is it. So sometimes it's easier said than done if we are under pressure, if we're talking a little bit fast as well. And elision and pace certainly do go hand in hand. We'll be talking about pace in a bit more detail in a minute. It goes without saying that if you're talking fast or at a pace that is faster than normal, you will speed up and skip over certain syllables or certain words. I'm going to say something that will sound quite odd and almost quite laughable, but whenever you are trying to avoid or prevent or at least limit elision, it can be quite draining. Why is that? Because you are really focusing in on completing every syllable of every word. I've exaggerated that just to make the point for you there. So if you feel that you may be somebody who elides, try your best from now on to complete every syllable of every word. The next little word I'd like to speak to you about is, well, it's two words, and it's vocal fry. So has anyone heard of vocal fry at all? If there are any singers here, you may have heard of it. The way that I have come to describe it is, again, quite an odd one, and it's the way Kim Kardashian sounds or the way Britney Spears sings. There are some very blank faces here. Some of you may not know either of those people, and others are starting to wonder and worry, my goodness, do I sound like Britney Spears? Here's what it is. It's whenever you're talking normally and your voice thing goes like this. So you're chatting away and then it's like this. My 10-year-old daughter has started to do it. So she would say something like, oh my goodness, mommy, I had such a great day at school. And I have to say, no, Eva, hold on now, make sure your voice is up and audible. So simply it's the crackling or sizzling of the vocal cords. It's very common. It's quite Americanized. And in fact, prior to that, I have a feeling, just in relation to some of the courses that I've done recently, that it may have originated in the Australian soap days back in the 1980s. So Home and Away and Neighbours, they also added to the whole upspeaking. You know, whenever some people talk like this at the end, it's quite Americanized and quite a, you know, there's definitely kind of Australian element to that as well. It's the same for vocal fry. So it's very important to ensure that your voice doesn't end up like this. Another way to look at it is to call it morning voice. So sometimes your voice is not quite ready to be used, so you're still quite groggy in the morning. So again, a little bit of vocal fry I've picked up today. Voice dropping. So that is actually different to vocal fry because the voice doesn't sizzle. It simply goes off the key. So you're chatting normally and then it goes. And again, what I have found today is that these are very subtle things. So it's not that people should be getting paranoid and thinking, oh, goodness, that must be, you know, a big problem that I have with this. I need to assess it. I need to focus on it. Not necessarily. It's just a very, very subtle thing. But if you have 2 or 3 of these things ongoing, you know, that would lend itself to taking away to your credibility or taking away from your credibility as a speaker. What else did I have written down there? Glottal stop. So some of you will know this as whenever you don't articulate fully the T sound. So instead of saying little, you say little. Instead of saying bottle, you say bottle. Now that's not incorrect. However, if you are looking to speak with more clarity and if you want more flow in your speech, it's important to articulate every part of a word. So that having been said, and it was a slight tangent, I'm hoping it's still relevant, we shall move on. Time-wise, we're going very well, 10 past 11. I mentioned we would have a quick chat about pace. People in the public eye who speak very fast. Do any examples come to mind immediately? If so, yes. Was that Anne who said that or Janice?
Janice. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. Without a doubt. And it seems to be quite a natural way of speaking for Michelle O'Neill that whenever I listen to her on the radio or watch her on the TV, personally, she makes me feel quite anxious because it takes a lot of energy for me to try to catch up with what she's saying. You know, it's very important to ensure that whatever message you want to impart to people, that you come across as clear. People who speak too fast sometimes, well, it's very subjective, of course. Some people might think, well, actually, you know what? I don't think Michelle O'Neill does speak fast, but I'd be very surprised at that. So for me, listening to somebody who speaks too fast makes me feel quite anxious. It also sometimes makes me question the credibility of the person that I'm listening to. So a good pace is highly effective. Not only does a slower speed make it easier for your audience to understand, it also makes you seem more composed and thoughtful. Your pacing at the outset should feel a little bit unnatural. So if you are addressing a crowd, for example, Scott is going to be addressing a big group of people very shortly. It stands to reason, Scott, that of course you're going to be feeling a little bit nervous, and that's a good thing. The reflection of nerves in the body, of course, is the quickening of the heart rate, dry mouth, sweaty palms, and quickening of speech. So I would suggest you remind yourself just before walking on stage or walking into the room that you need to begin at a pace that feels a little bit unnatural, because inevitably, unfortunately, your pace will pick up in any event. So even if you begin at a slightly slower pace, you then feel a little bit more composed and confident. It'll make your audience feel more comfortable as well. So that's a little tip.
Sorry, can I say something there?
Yes.
I'm originally from Derry myself. Michelle
Yes.
O'Neill's from Derry, and it's a trait up in that part of the world. We actually speak very fast.
Yes.
And when I first started working overseas, I had that problem. They couldn't understand me because I spoke so fast. And but it is a trait, and it is actually a trait from Northern Ireland.
Yes.
And I remember when I was at school, our careers lecture, when we were all going off to England and wherever for interviews for university, he told us very clearly that we don't come over very well when we go to England because we don't communicate very well. We speak fast, even though there's no difference in our intelligence or knowledge levels. We just don't come over very well.
Very interesting, Scott. Totally agree with you. And actually, I'm just wondering, well, I don't want to put anybody on the spot here, but a lot of my clients from Tyrone, County Tyrone, would be very, very fast speakers. Derry as well. In fact, you're right, all over Northern Ireland and Ireland in general, it seems to be a trait. You're absolutely right. And, you know, I'm a great believer in people being able to find their own feet, communicate as comfortably and as naturally as possible. But even though it is a trait, you're right about that, it can still be tweaked and people can still slow themselves down, as you've shown there. And it's very clear to me that you have been abroad because you are a very, very clear speaker, you know. And, you know, I have a little bugbear about some people who go off to different countries and come back within a very, very short period of time speaking in a different accent completely. Now, I know why that happens technically, but sometimes I think some of it is mirroring others, wanting to be understood. So I totally appreciate that. You're trying to empathize with your audience. You want to be understood. You want to be persuasive at that. In terms of pace itself as a standalone issue, it's really, really important that at least we start at a slightly slower pace. Now, if you can control it, I'm talking about in a general sense here, if people can control their pace going forward at all times, then great. In my experience, it takes quite a lot of self-control and quite a lot of discipline and concentration, to be honest. So even at the beginning, just prior to work presentation, prior to your job interview, whatever it may be, try your best just to slow yourself down a little bit. It also makes you feel slightly calmer, you know. So lots of tips there. Thank you very much, Scott, for sharing that with us as well. So what happens when we decrease our rate of speech? This is very subjective. This is my view. I believe we sound more confident, prepared, certain, and authoritative. This is something else that we'll be seeing later on today, that some of the time our volume also increases and our clarity of speech is better. This is something that I found myself, and there's an exercise that I've put in here that I think illustrates this perfectly. There's something within us inherently, I have found, that whenever we increase our volume, something within us, there's a spark which almost says, okay, now that I'm talking more loudly, I also need to be clearer and I need to be slower as well. So it all, once again, goes hand in hand. It all works together there. In relation to pace as well, it's important to speak fluently. Now, I myself have a very subtle stammer, which some people are sometimes a little bit surprised at, given my choice of career now and my choice of previous career as a solicitor. It was much worse as a child, but I remember being at the Institute of Professional Legal Studies, and we had to do what's called a plea. So Janice will know about that. Really a plea in litigation when you stand up and represent your client for example, let's say a speeding charge. So it was a mock plea. And for some reason, my stammer, which had almost gone completely at the age of 23, 24 at the Institute, all of a sudden came back out of nowhere. I was listening and looking at my other classmates who got up, did their plea for 2 or 3 minutes, took a seat. I was going up towards the very end, and whatever happened, whenever I stood up, no sound would come out whatsoever. I mean, absolutely nothing came out of my mouth. And of course, you can imagine the whole class began to laugh. The tutor questioned what was going on. Everything okay, Sinead? It was absolutely mortifying. And I know, looking back, it was all to do with breathing. It's such a throwaway thing to say, that breathing is integral to feeling and being perceived as calm. But had I breathed properly then, just a simple breath in through your nose, out through your mouth, and then tried to speak, it would have been much better. So breathing deeply at the outset to slow your heart rate right down, like I've just done. And immediately it has calmed me down. Immediately I feel a little bit more chilled out, relaxed, and ready to go. So beginning at a pace that feels a little bit unnatural, maintaining that pace as best you can. Here's something else that I picked up in my research and in my training. To routinely pause. Now, there is a controversial technique that if you routinely pause every couple of seconds, that will help your flow of speech. Now, I have to be honest, for me, it doesn't really work that well. So I'm just being totally open with you. There's no point in me imparting these techniques and telling you all about them if I haven't tried them myself. So some trainers would swear by the fact that if you just talk as normal at a normal rate and then pause routinely every 3 to 5 seconds, that then maintains a nice slow pace and a good flow of speech. Try it yourself. See how you get on. 1 or 2 clients of mine have found it helpful, but I think sometimes it takes an awful lot of effort because you're almost counting inwardly. So you're chatting away and then you stop talking. And then you continue. To me, it feels unnatural. That's just my view. There's this lovely word, elision, once again. Avoid elision, and it really is so common. Listen to yourself articulating and finishing every word, not only every word, but every syllable of every word. Even if it feels a little bit exaggerated, it will lend itself to you coming across as a much more credible speaker. The third way of communication then is visual. Body language, gestures, facial expression, and eye contact. Attire to a lesser extent. So we're talking eye contact here. So sometimes people in general are quite uncomfortable in maintaining eye contact with people for too long. They think, this feels a little bit odd, a bit strange, a bit uncomfortable. So they lose the eye contact and their eye gaze goes somewhere else completely. A little rule of thumb. Again, I keep on going back to Scott here, I think because I can see it on my screen. I can only see 4 people and Scott's one of them. Whenever Scott is doing his lecture in a few weeks' time, Scott, if he already sees someone in the audience who is engaged, they're nodding, smiling, a slight head tilt, complete the point that you're making to that person and then move on to the next, because that will give you a little boost. You'll think, this is good. I'm engaging somebody here. I'm building a rapport with them. I'm doing well. Then move on to the next person. I'm sure this won't happen, but if you do see somebody who, God forbid, is yawning, looking out the window, looking at their phones, stretching in the audience, it can throw you. If it does happen, simply ignore and move on. So we're not going to do this as a practical exercise, but have a think about a time when you thought your own body language or someone else's was very, very negative, very, very closed. There are the obvious things, of course, folding your arms. There's also one about, sitting cross-legged. I find that comfortable. Some trainers would say, no, that's closed body language. I'm sitting here right now at home with my legs crossed because it's comfortable. So a lot of these things are very, very subjective. In terms of using your hands as well, it's fine to use them to some extent without totally going over the top. An open palm shows trustworthiness and transparency. So that again is a good tip, even not just for people like Scott who are going to be giving lectures, but for teachers, for lawyers, whatever your job. Research has shown, and you can check this out if you wish, that an open palm, especially 2 open palms, shows that you're more open and more trustworthy. Finding your natural speaking voice, because sometimes we can feel a little bit forced, a little bit contrived. Sometimes we feel we're trying to emulate somebody else. Is this coming across as a little bit artificial? We always want to sound natural and feel comfortable. Easy on the ears, again, goes without saying. If you can think of somebody in the public eye whose voice you like, it's very likely that their voice is a nice voice, a pleasant voice. A very lazy example I'm going to give here, Joanna Lumley. For me, her voice is very pleasant to listen to. It's very mellow, it's very honey-like, lyrical, melodic, all of those words. So it's nothing to do with her accent. She has a lovely posh English accent as well. I'm just talking about the tone of voice. So it's very important to try to be easy on the ears. Being flexible as well. The variation that I spoke about earlier, being flexible in terms of your tone as well and your pace. It's okay to talk fast sometimes, by the way. I wouldn't want to come across as trying to make the point that you should never talk fast ever. Of course, it has its place, but whenever you're talking from a conversational, educative point of view, it's much more professional to slow it right down. Speaking from your diaphragm as opposed to the throat. Very, very important. Some of you may be familiar with yoga practice, and the same breathing techniques that are used for yoga are used for public speaking. Apparently, Pilates has a whole other way of breathing. I don't know much about that, but I certainly know that it's important to ensure that all your organs of articulation are perfectly aligned to ensure that you get a free and constant flow of speech out. Finally, having an even resonance. That's simply going back to listening out for your echo in the room. So if any of you have Zoom calls or team calls, sitting in your house at home, it's important to ensure that you can hear your own echo, to make sure that you're speaking at the right volume and that you have a good resonance. Going a little bit further then into breathing exercises, we're going to do a couple of different exercises here. Breathing from your diaphragm. In a second, we're all going to stand up with our hand over our belly. We're going to breathe in through our nose, then breathe out through our mouth and speak on the exhale. So going back to my very mild stammer, which still comes back sometimes, I've learned to live with it. It's all to do with breathing properly. Whenever I teach these breathing techniques to children, I always say, breathe through your snout, belly goes out. Of course, they think this is hilarious, but they do remember it, because whenever we breathe through our nose, sometimes it feels natural to bring our tummy in, but actually it's the opposite. You should breathe through your nose. Your stomach should be going out, and only when you breathe out, your tummy should then be going in. I did a course with RADA, which was absolutely wonderful, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, and it was an amazing course. I was expecting all kinds of highfalutin techniques, all kinds of highbrow exercises. This was one of them, and it's so simple and so effective. If we could all try this now. If you wouldn't mind, everyone standing up, and I will do it as well. So please put your hand over your belly button. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to breathe through your nose. Hold for a couple of seconds. Whenever you exhale through your mouth, your belly should be going in. First of all, we'll try number one. I want you to say ah for as long as you can without passing out. Okay, so here we go. I'll do number one with you. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take a seat now, and I would love it if you could all try numbers 2 and 3. So you're all on mute, which is great for me. If there's anybody else in your house or your office, I'm sure they'll be wondering what on earth is going on. So make sure you do this properly. Breathe through your nose. Your belly should be going out when you breathe in. Whenever you breathe out through your mouth, your belly should be going in. And I want you to say, ah, this time starting quietly and getting louder. Make sure it's gradual. Okay, off you go. Okay, I'm going to trust you all that you've done that. Okay, perfect. And the last one is exactly the same thing again, but this time, if you could say ah, starting loudly and getting very, very quiet indeed. Off you go, please. Excellent. If you're all ready, you can take a seat. You'd be glad to know that's the end of those particular exercises. And what RADA advised us to do was not, strangely, to do these every morning. I had assumed that that was going to be the advice. What they suggested was prior to any, well, in their words, acting event, so performance on stage. So if you would like to apply that to your work environment, prior to any court appearance, prior to any class you're about to teach, prior to any lecture you're about to give, simply, number one, to calm down, number two, to slow down, and number three, just to feel a little bit more present in the moment. We're going to be talking a little bit about presence later on and how important it is to be present in the moment. A little practical example here in relation to what kind of voice you have. And whoever takes this one on will be very brave. And once again, you can say whatever you like. It doesn't have to be accurate. My most embarrassing moment. This is just a reason, an excuse for us to listen to people's voices. So whoever takes this on, have a think, first of all, about your 3 words. Remember that you wrote down at the outset. Have a glance down at those. Remind yourself you are those 3 things. If you think that sometimes you elide your words, try not to do that. If you think sometimes you engage in some vocal fry, which is a reminder of speaking like this, sometimes you're talking normally and your voice goes down like that. Try not to do that. Let's not have any voice dropping at all. Listen out for your own echo in the room. Try to avoid any glottal stops. Again, it's not incorrect. It's just a little bit more professional and a little bit clearer to articulate the T's. And what else did we have? Yes, in relation to pace, make sure you begin at a pace that feels a little bit unnatural, so a little bit slower than normal. Would anyone like to take this on? Tumbleweed. I think Lynn is quite tempted. Lynn Campbell looks poised and ready to go there. What do you think, Lynn? Lynn was here first this morning, bright and breezy.
There's only one sort of situation that I can think of. I was in Thailand at the time, and I was at an international meeting, and they passed around the microphone and asked everyone to say where they came from. So when it came to me, I said I was from Northern Ireland. And after the session had ended, this gentleman came over to me and he said, oh, he says, you're from Rhode Island. I'm from Rhode Island too. So having always thought I spoke quite clearly in that, it certainly let me know that I didn't speak clearly enough, and that he had picked up that he thought I was from Rhode Island.
And Lynn, the big question we all want to know is, did you let him believe that you were?
No, I said to him, actually, I'm sorry, I'm from Northern Ireland. And he just said, okay, and turned around and went and spoke to somebody else.
Fantastic, Lynn. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to put people on the spot there. Thank you so much for that. Much appreciated. Let's move on. I hope my own voice bears up here. It's just ironic that it seems to be on its way out. Vocal modulation. And once again, Anne Garvey will know all about this particular element. So projection, articulation, pause, and pace. All of these elements together lend themselves to you becoming a much more credible speaker. So again, there's a lot of overlap, a lot of repetition. This is simply a reminder to project. Sometimes people talk into themselves, as I call it. So their heads are down, they're almost introspectively, talking down. They're not talking out. So try to ensure that you talk out to your audience, whether that be one person or 100 people. Articulation. I remember when I used to sing in a choir as a child, there was one elderly lady who has since passed away, and she articulated in such a wonderful way in hindsight. She almost did it in a very exaggerated way. So she would absolutely articulate every syllable of every word. Of course, as children, we thought this was hilarious. We all used to stare at her. And really, she is one of the people that I have come across in life who's one of the clearest speakers as well. Not only did she sing beautifully and had a lovely voice, her clarity of speech every time she spoke to us as children was just incredible. So I noticed it in childhood. So it's very, very important to ensure that you articulate as many syllables as you can. Sometimes we're under pressure, we do elide, sometimes we skip over certain parts, but if you can remember, it's very important to do it as much as you possibly can. Pause. I've just paused. That was a dramatic pause. It was an exaggerated pause, and it was a pause to demonstrate the effectiveness of it. We all know comedians who have amazing comic timing. I saw Alan Partridge in Belfast at the weekend, and he was very funny indeed. His comic timing, for me, was to do with the pause that he used. If a comedian doesn't use pause effectively enough, the whole joke is absolutely lost. Similarly, if you have an important statistic to put forward to your board, if you have a really important point to make in the courtroom, if you've got something very exciting to tell a class, use pause. Again, very, very obvious, but in the spur of the moment and through lack of practice or awareness, it simply doesn't happen often enough. And there's pace at the end, we've spoken about that. So let's move on. A little bit of prose here. Quick time check, 22:12, that's grand, we're well on track here. Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. So this is just a little bit of text here. Would anyone like to give this a go? There are some interesting words in here, but this is just, I suppose, to take some people out of their comfort zone. I know some others will be very comfortable with this type of text. Whoever takes this on, if you could have a think about your 3 words, how do you want to come across to your audience? Make sure you do come across that way to your audience. Try not to elide your words. We don't want any elision. We don't want any vocal fry, no voice dropping, no glottal stops. Begin at a pace that feels a little bit unnatural, so quite slow. Listen out for your echo in the room to ensure you're speaking loudly enough. Would anyone like to have a go at this? This is probably one of the easier ones because you're simply reading. So if that's going to encourage anyone, I hope so. Let's have a look. I'll give it another few seconds here. Lynn, thank you so much. Thank you.
Far from the Maddening Crowd by Thomas Hardy. When Farmer Oak smiled, the corners of his mouth spread till they were within the unimportant distance of his ears. His eyes were reduced to chinks, and diverging wrinkles appeared around them, extending upon his countenance like the rays in a rudimentary sketch of the rising sun. His Christian name was Gabriel, and on working days he was a young man of sound judgment, easy motions, proper dress, and general good character. On Sundays he was a man of misty views, rather given to postponing and hampered by his best clothes and umbrella. Upon the whole, one who felt himself to occupy morally that vast middle space of Laconia, neutrality, which lay between the communion people of the parish and the drunken section. That is, he went to church, but yawned privately by the time the congregation had reached the Nicene Creed, and thought of what there would be for dinner when he meant to be listening to the sermon.
Lynn, thank you so much. That's not an easy passage to read by any means, especially that wonderful word there in the second paragraph. So well done on that, I have to say now. In terms of your own voice, Lynn, do you want to give us an idea of how you view it?
I think when I do any public speaking and that, I like to come across as knowledgeable, to know what I'm talking about. I like to be passionate, and that people can buy into that passion and can feel the passion, and that I am clear in what I'm saying, that I'm engaging with people.
Thank you very much for that, Lynn. All of that came across without a doubt there. I'm sure everybody else would agree. You seemed very comfortable actually with the text, I have to say. Really nice slow pace as well. I couldn't hear any of those little words that we were chatting about earlier, elision or vocal fry, and a really good use of inflection as well. So I said I wouldn't pick on anyone, but I think when things are positive, it's maybe nice to hear that. So thank you very much for that, Lynn. Confident communication. So there we have Winston Churchill in the background, not a very popular character for some, quite controversial. However, I've always marveled at the fact that he had a speech impediment and really mumbled quite a lot, but was yet such a powerful orator. Clearly, he used an awful lot of gestures, probably to an extent that was, a little bit over the top, but people really listened, whether they wanted to or not. So an engaging voice. We've spoken a lot about the voice today. Confident body language. Make sure people feel comfortable. Make sure people are engaged by how you present yourself to them. Poise, again, feeling a little bit at ease and comfort with the audience. I really enjoy this particular slide because some of the answers I've heard over the past couple of years have really surprised me, because it is very personal. People have their own views. So I put a photo of Morgan Freeman here, simply to show the range of voices that we have in the world. Morgan Freeman, I'm sure all of you are familiar with him. Lovely, deep, comforting tones, compared with the very different, contrasting voice of Joe Pasquale. I'm hoping all of you will know Joe Pasquale. Recently, people weren't aware of who he was. So different kinds of voices across the spectrum. So we have some very good comedians and imitators and impressionists, but not everyone can get absolutely every nuance of your speech. You'll always have your own tiny little unique elements that nobody else can ever emulate, which is quite comfort, I think, that we're all unique. Tone and pace, very individual, of course. Recording yourself. Now, this is very, very important. Even though it's excruciating for most people, if not all, I would always advise clients to record themselves even on their phone. So if you are preparing for something important, if you are simply curious, record yourself on the vocal recorder on your mobile phone. Most mobile phones have one, I believe. You could be reciting your times tables. You could be saying a prayer. You could be saying a poem. You could be reading something from the newspaper. You could be talking absolute nonsense. An important thing to do for me, I found, is to listen to it back. Not to overanalyze, but simply to analyze. Was I too fast there? Did I elide? Was there any vocal fry? Was there any voice dropping? Listen out for the echo. Now that's challenging enough when it's on a phone, to be fair. While you are recording yourself though, try to listen out for your echo in the room. Were there any glottal stops? And something I haven't actually mentioned is enunciating your ings, coming and going. Now this sometimes is controversial because some clients say, look, that's not me. I don't want to come across as haughty-taughty. That's not what I'm about. It's not that I am proclaiming that everyone should immediately become extremely posh and start enunciating your ings all the time, like in a really unnatural way. What I am saying is the fact that if you want to come across as clear, professional, knowledgeable, passionate, it's very important that you enunciate every part of every word. So the ings is part of that. It's not common, it's coming. Again, when we are more comfortable in our personal surroundings, for example, at home, we are more inclined to relax into ourselves and not be as strict with our ings. What I would suggest is that you introduce enunciating your ings, if you don't already, into your home environment as well. Now, it may be met with chuckles from your children, your partner. Why on earth are you talking like that? A lot of the time, whenever I bring these points up to people, there is some overwhelm. People think, right, well, I've identified that I lied. I definitely engage in vocal fry. I don't enunciate my ings. And they try to deal with everything in a holistic way at the one time. Now, each to their own, but I would discourage that because it's too much to deal with. You get a bit bored, you almost forget what exactly was I meant to do. There's too much going on. So if you have identified any of these elements within your own communication today, deal with one thing at a time for a period of weeks and then move on to the next element. For example, if you do think you are someone who tends to engage in vocal fry, focus on that and that alone for a few weeks and then move on to the next element. After 6 months, I would say, all of these things will become much more automated. Your audience, your listeners will think, you know what, she's really good. He is very good. They won't know why, but it will be because you have worked on all of these elements. And all of these things together, as I've said lots of times previously, lend themselves to you being a much more effective speaker. Now, there are 3 videos coming up. Purely for time and convenience purposes, I'm going to send these links to Niall, who hopefully will then send them on to you. So you can look at these 3 videos in your own time. They're very, very different. This particular lady is a Spanish speaker from South America, and she, in this case, recites a poem. The poem is in English, parts of it are in Spanish, and the content is, she talks about her father, who is a proud Spanish speaker, and he's offended and upset that she does not speak Spanish outside of the house. The daughter then talks about being accepted and how challenging it is for her simply to speak Spanish, solely Spanish. Again, very subjective here. This is my view. You may listen to it and think, yeah, well, she's fine, but I know better speakers, and that's absolutely fine. For me, the interesting thing is that she's actually quite softly spoken. So there's no need to be really, really loud. She is mic'd up, however, she does have a mic there, but she's very gentle, she's very passionate. She has the audience eating out of the palm of her hand. She's just so engaging. A short summary of this lady. This reminds me a great deal of that wonderful young lady who recited the poem at the inauguration of Joe Biden. Although this particular lady recited this poem years prior to that, there are definitely echoes of Martin Luther King in this, very, very strong. Emotive is the word. There are lots of different kinds of speaking, but that's for a whole other workshop. You have to identify the purpose of why you are speaking. What is it that you want to impart to your audience? For me, I think this particular lady wants the audience to feel revitalized. She wants them to feel angry, passionate. It's extremely powerful. And we have this guy, Beryl Solomon. What an amazing name. This guy is a Hasidic Jew who's based in Canada, I believe, and I came across him on LinkedIn. This particular video, it does go on a little bit, but even if you watch 1 minute of it, it's more so to see what he does at the beginning of his speech. So this is a keynote of his on how to generate £500,000 or dollars worth of sales on LinkedIn. It's not necessarily what he says, it's how he says it, how he prepares himself. So it's very Americanized. He walks up to the stage, punching the air. There's music in the background. The room is full of energy. But interestingly, once he takes to the stage, he says absolutely nothing for a good 8 or 9 seconds. So much so that the audience starts to heckle him. They start to shout out, "Beryl, what is it, man? Come on." You would think he would feel quite uncomfortable. Absolutely not. You can tell he's nervous. He has his notes in his hand. His hands are shaking. You can see him breathing. And whenever he starts to speak, it's very, very punctuated. It's possibly a little bit too loud. He does shout, and it's almost minister-like from the pulpit. But by goodness, is the audience engaged? So have a look at these 3 videos in your own time. We're coming towards the end now. I would like to speak to you all very briefly about presence. Some of you, all of you perhaps, will know Amy Cuddy. Amy Cuddy is a Harvard professor in psychology. She herself was the subject of controversy a while ago. She was accused of being a little bit of a waffler, of someone who, wasn't exactly sure of what she was doing. She was ostracized by a lot of fellow psychologists. She has now found her way back into the fold, and she has regained a lot of her credibility. So what is it that she preaches? Simply that you can pretend to yourself that you're feeling confident. You can fool your body into thinking you are more confident than you are. So some people immediately are very, very skeptical. Some people, when I tell them about this, if they aren't aware of it, they say, right, wise up, come on now. Some people even start to laugh. How could there be any truth in this? The truth is that there is truth in it. It's been demonstrated and shown many, many times. And even the most skeptical of people eventually come round. All of my clients, bar one, has given me feedback to say that this has worked for them. This works for me as well. I do the power pose prior to any speaking event. I did it today, earlier on. The power pose simply is when you stand in front of a mirror, breathe, and say either, "I am Wonder Woman, I can do this," or "I am Superman, I can do this." It all sounds very silly, doesn't it? Whatever it is, it could well be a placebo effect. It tends to work for most of my clients. And I want to tell you very briefly about the one client of mine for whom it did not work. And this was a lady who was doing her final exams in medicine at Queen's. They have an oral, a verbal exam at the end. She came to me for a few sessions in the weeks leading up to her exam. I had taught her all about the power pose. We had practiced it. We knew exactly what was going to happen. She had practiced her answers inside out. However, on the day, she was asked a question and she took an absolute blank. She could not remember anything at all. She began to panic a little bit, excused herself, went out to the bathroom. She tried to do the power pose. Hands on hips, feet hip width apart, breathing, looking at herself in the mirror. What she said was, "You know what, Sinead, I could barely even see myself because of the tears. I was so upset." The difficulty for this poor lady was that she was so far gone that there was no return. So it's very important, if you are feeling nervous or uncertain or tired even, or even under the weather, that you do the power pose in time. In time to remind yourself, I am my 3 words, whatever they may be. I am capable. That's why you're all here listening to me, and I can do it. So I find that very, very useful indeed. If you are skeptical, just try it out. These are age-old techniques here which still work. Again, they work for most people. Posture is very important, even to give an impression of confidence. If you're not feeling confident and you're hunched over, you look introspective, you look nervous, you look lacking in knowledge, all of those negative words. Even if you're sitting, shoulders back, chest forward, feet hip width apart. This could work as well, actually, if you are sitting or standing. Feeling your feet rooted to the floor. Sometimes if we feel very, very nervous, we can feel ourselves drifting. There's almost a light airiness about it. Not that we're fainting as such, but that we're drifting up. There's an ethereal sense to it that we're just drifting up. And we're thinking, I cannot wait for this to be over. Oh my goodness, I'm so light and airy. We don't want that. The reality is you need to tell yourself this is happening, whether I want it to happen or not. So what's the worst that can happen? Your audience might think, oh dear, they weren't that great. They're a wee bit nervous. We've dealt with worse things. Press your feet firmly into the ground, firmly but gently. Pretend you have a dragon tail. This is another wonderful concept attached to your lower back to feel weighty. Going back to that word gravitas at the outset, feeling heavy and weighted, that you are present and that you have presence. Smiling, of course, again, such a throwaway point to make, but it's so true. Breathe, smile, pause. Lastly, before you begin speaking, let your brain drop into your stomach to center yourself and switch off from thoughts in your head. Sometimes we get too much up here in our head thinking, oh no, this is not going to go well. This is going to be terrible. I'm not going to come across well. What's going to happen? Oh no, panic. We don't want that. We want all the energy here to fall to our stomach, again, adding to our weightiness. Very quickly, 10 simple rules for more confident communication. I don't propose to read them all out here. Knowing your audience is a given. You need to tweak and tailor your content to whoever you're talking to. Telling stories. Everyone loves a good story. We're a nation of storytellers here. So if you are a good raconteur, raconteuse, it's very, very important to ensure that you build rapport with your listeners. We have about 3 minutes left, if that's okay with everyone. Telling stories. Would anyone like to have a go at this practical example? This is a very, very easy one. There's only about maybe 3 more exercises left until the end. So this one is about your morning routine. So what could be simpler? We just need you to speak to us for 30 seconds this time, very, very short and sweet, about whenever you wake up in the morning, whenever you open your eyes, until you arrive at your desk, or until you arrive at the breakfast table, whatever it may be, with one caveat, with only one exception. Nothing you tell us can be true. You have to make the whole thing up from the moment you open your eyes until the moment you reach your desk. Would anyone like to give this a go? This is usually quite fun. So, somebody we haven't heard from. People are starting to wane. I think they're getting quite tired towards the end. Would anyone like to give this a go? Thank you, Janice. Good woman. Go ahead.
This morning at 6 o'clock, I woke to a lick on my face. I turned my head and there was my dog, Connor. Where are we going? Well, we're going for a walk. When are we going? Well, we're going now. I jumped out of bed, put on my Superwoman costume, did my power pose in the mirror and ran downstairs out the door. But it had snowed overnight. The place was covered in the white stuff. What was I going to do? I had no coat. So I turned, tried to open the front door, It was locked. Adam was at the gym. Oh no, I was going to have to try and waken up the dreaded twosome. They were upstairs, still in the land of snore. So I rang the bell, I rapped the door, and my darling 16-year-old came down in his underpants, opened the door, and I woke up.
Well done, Janice. And you know what? I know that that is true. It's not even a story. That's all
No,
true,
it's
isn't
not.
it? Thanks very much, Janice. Excellent. Okay, so we are moving slowly towards the end. Storytelling, 3 words. Okay, we'll get somebody to do this, and then we'll maybe do 2 more, and then I promise I will leave it, okay? So, storytelling, 3 words. If I give you 3 words, could somebody tell us a story in 20 seconds? How about it? So what about dog, policeman, and park? Anyone like to do that? Nobody for that one? That's quite all right. Let's move on. Body language and appearance. I spoke to you about this earlier when I was chatting with Scott. So if someone is already engaged, they're smiling, they're open body language. At times, a slight head tilt is quite a good indicator that someone is engaged and listening to you. So if you already see someone doing that, continue the point and move on to somebody else. We've talked about eye contact. Varying your delivery, tone, pause, inflection, everything needs to be varied and flexible, otherwise it comes across as quite staid. Okay, so could I possibly ask Anne to do this? I don't want to pick on you, Anne, but I know you'd be very good at it. So if you're willing to do it.
I am willing to do it. I
Thank
certainly
you so
will
much,
try
Anne.
it. Okay,
Well,
haven't tried this one, so you're challenging me now. Let me just see. Okay,
Well,
let's. Okay,
just
can I have
before-
a second to look over it? Yeah.
Of course you can, Anne. Just before you start though, if you wouldn't mind, all you need to do is read it out. However, could you just read the first half down to the word purple in your own voice, just in your own normal voice?
Okay.
And then if you could do the second half another way, but I'll tell you about that shortly. Is that okay?
Okay. And a different way as in a different accent, or say it, or tone?
Well, if I could tell you about that just in a second, probably a different accent and maybe a different tone as well. But if you just do the first half down to the word purple in your own lovely voice. Thank you.
Okay. A poor pauper paused on purpose to pawn a dropped porpoise. Periodically, he pranced through the stop pillars that pierced the paned priory. Precisely, pedantically, and even particularly, the pauper, named Peter, picked his way through the piles of painted purple.
Fantastic, Anne, that was great. Could I please have you read the second half in a received pronunciation accent? So I'm sure all of you will know what that is. So it's a very posh English accent, darling. Whenever you're ready, please take it away, Anne.
Pink and puce petals that had been placed in the grasp of the hopeful chimp, perfectly positive of his own opinion and even more so of his platinum bagpipes, he peppered the air with his perfect playing and hopeful political prayers.
That deserves a round of applause, Anne. Fantastic. Can anyone guess that Anne is also a speech and drama teacher? Amazing. And you know what? It's so interesting because every single time this happens, whenever people read the first half, it's fine, it's very clear, it's great. However, once we say, put on a posh accent, not only does the accent change, but guess what? The volume increases, the clarity increases, and also we talk much more slowly. So what is the point I'm trying to make? I'm certainly not telling people to go and change your accent, but you can if you want. What I am saying is borrow the other elements of that. So not the accent, but the slowing down, the excess clarity, the general volume, you know, so that's a very, very important exercise, I think. Now, I've been extremely ambitious in a number of slides here. I'm going to skip towards the end because I'm sure people are hungry It's now 12:10. Practice, that's a very obvious one. I'm going to let people off. These get very nasty, these kind of texts here, very, very difficult ones here. So let's skip on, skip on, skip on. Voice exercises. These are very important indeed. And again, some of these are from RADA. So some of them are very, very straightforward, very simplistic. And if anyone would like me to email these to them afterwards, because I know some of you, I'm very happy to do so. Yawning, I find, is a good one. So not the sound, just the action, you know, making sure that your mouth is ready to articulate. Avoid clogging food and drink. So cups of teas, well, certainly with milk in them anyway. Chocolate, never so good for your speaking voice because it tends to clog everything up. You don't just sound quite as clear. Now, apologies for the bad word here, but this is directly from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. So these are some exercises to relax your face and voice. So the face ones are very amusing. So the Kim Kardashian pout, there we have Kim once again, raising her head here. So that is what has come to be known as the duck pout. So when people pose on social media, so pretty much an exaggerated pout. Also cat arse, which is this. And no teeth, which is this. This is from RADA, guys. This is not from me. So couldn't believe it when this was coming up. So really, really good to get your mouth ready to articulate some words. And what I will do is I will leave you with somebody reciting Hamlet. This is the last thing in the whole workshop. Would anyone like to have a go at this? And before somebody has a go, please remember, we don't want any elision. We don't want any vocal fry. No voice dropping. Listen out for your echo in the room. Make sure you begin at a pace that feels a little bit unnatural. Is anyone willing to give this a go? And then I promise I will let you all go home. What about Niall McKevitt? Niall's tempted there, I think, aren't you, Niall?
I was thinking about it.
I saw that.
So, to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep we say we end. The heartache and the thousand natural shocks, that flesh is here to, 'tis a consumption, devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes a calamity of so long life.
Absolutely wonderful for that, Niall. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. So here's the cringy bit at the end. Fake it till you make it. I actually can't stand that phrase, but there are quite a few, you know, wafflers, I believe, in the world. People who, you know, walk the walk, talk the talk. I think it's important for all of us to appreciate the fact that we have capabilities, we have our own abilities, we have our own skills, and fake it till you make it. So keep on practicing. Really think about your 3 words. So if you take anything away from today, it's to remember what your 3 words are. Very highly effective indeed. Thank you very much, everyone. I do apologize for going over time. It's almost time for me to rest my own voice. So if there are any questions, I will stop the share, will I, Niall? Yeah, and I'll come back to you all and I'll take any questions if there are any. Maybe there aren't.
Very quickly, Sinead, because I know you're pressed for time. I do a fair bit of public speaking now. I give a fair few lectures in our respective career, your own career, and I have had to give a number of Zoom lectures where I don't have a focus, I don't have an audience, and I have found this particularly challenging because I've always captured the person in the audience who I think looks the most interested. But when you're speaking to a blank screen, have you any advice about what you might do in that scenario?
That's a very good point, Janice, and a question that's asked quite a lot actually. Really, if you are comfortable with putting a little dot or some kind of post-it note or some kind of marker on your screen, I know it sounds very, very contrived, that has proven to work quite a lot, so that if your eyes tend to wander, if you're feeling a little bit uncertain or unsure about where to look, simply look at that. Now, it does take a little bit of practice and it does feel a wee bit forced, but I have found, certainly for clients of mine, it has helped. The other thing is, Janice, this is a very obvious thing to say, but if you are able to reduce the number of screens, of boxes, people you can see, to just one person and look at them, if that makes sense, you know the way you can do that?
Yeah.
Reduce it right down to the person who's engaged, or feeling that there is a way whereby you can reduce it down so the only person you can see is yourself. So that may make you even more uncomfortable, but some people may find speaking to themselves without actually seeing anyone else's reaction is much better than looking at others, you know. Okay. So there are a couple of things you can try, yeah. And again, with Zoom, you know, we're all still learning. And in fact, you know, some of the people here today experienced earlier a few little technical bloopers that I had at the start. And of course, it happened in the course of my own workshop. So, you know, it's just one of those things people have to get used to. You know, are you doing more of them, Janice, or do you find it's easing off a little bit with the Zoom?
Oh no, I spend now 50% of my time in interacting is by Zoom, easily 50%. Yeah. It's better, it's great from the time saving point of view, but it's the disconnect is very difficult.
Yes, it's hard sometimes to come across and to feel natural, I find, you know, especially sometimes if there's a delay with the communication, it can feel a little bit awkward. But hopefully there's something there you can pick up, Janice.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great.
Anything else?
I'd appreciate having the slides sent through if that would be possible. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, Lynn. There is a summarised version of the slides, and also I'll put the links to those videos on it as well, and including those voice exercises and the facial exercises, which are usually quite popular too.
Sinead, I just want to say a big thanks from my side, to be fair. You re-emphasise everything, because in actual fact tomorrow I start actually doing what you've been discussing today, because the presentations are now done. And I know I did an MBA at the University of Ulster back in maybe 15 years ago, and we did all of this, and it was, I think Paddy McNamee was the lecturer, and he made it very clear to us it was basically 5 times more work involved in preparing for the actual speech presentation and actually doing the slides.
Absolutely, indeed. Well, it's good that it's going to be so fresh in your head then, Scott. It'll be very spontaneous. Thanks. Best of luck with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Sorry, I have to go now. If you don't mind.
Yes, that's okay. Absolutely fine.
To Belfast. Thanks.
That's fine, Scott. Thank you.
Best of luck to everybody. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Sinead. Thank you, Niall. That was excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you.
No problem, Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Lynn. Thank you. I think Janice is super keen here.
I'll give you a ring, actually. I am super keen to talk to you about another thing, but sure, I'll give you a ring. Your number's still the same, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Janice. It'd be lovely to chat to you. Thank you.
All right. See you soon.
See you later. Bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
I think we could just stop the recording there, will we?
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. I can get that.